Good morning, everyone, and aloha. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko ngā pui te iwi, ko te mahurihuri te hapu, ko waima te awa, ko whakatere mana waka iaia te maunga, ko ngā toki mata whaurua te waka, ko tuirangi taku marae, ko Hoku Conklin taku ingoa, no reira tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone, and greetings. We're delighted to be with you this morning. Wanted to begin with a brief pepeha in my Māori tradition to let you know where I come from, where my family comes from. Pictured here, you can in the background you can see my family's awa river in the northland of New Zealand, in our mountain Whakatere, our waka. This is a picture of myself and my wife Finau. She's from Fiji, and our dog Bruce. But without further ado, I'll turn the time to our co-presenters, Cameron He, Chaylene Mataali'i, and Eden Semu to introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron He. I'm a third-year PhD student here at BYU, attempting to get my PhD in MFT. And I'm originally from Kailua Kona, Hawaii, more specifically Kalawa, which is just north of the Kailua Kona area. And I'm happy to be here with you all this morning.
Hi, my name is Chaylene Mataali'i. I just got married, so my last name is Tawati now. But I'm from LA, more specifically Torrance, and I'm here in Utah at BYU. I'm an undergraduate studying psychology and minoring in sociology. So a little about me.
Hi, I'm Eden. I'm also an undergraduate psychology student. I'm minoring statistics at BYU. I was born and raised in Auckland, New Zealand, and both my parents are half Samoan, and I currently live in Northwest Washington State.
Thank you. And a big thank you to our student presenters. They're in the midst of finals right now, and so really grateful to them and taking time to present with me this morning. As was mentioned, so we're affiliated with BYU and we're on the Polynesian Psychology Research Team. And BYU is based in Provo, Utah, which is on the ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute people. And so we want to acknowledge them. And in my Māori tradition, after we introduce ourselves, we share a song or a waiata. And so I wanted to share a song or a waiata with you all this morning. This waiata, it's based on a Māori proverb, which is he aha te nui mea o te ao, which is what is the most important thing in the world? And the answer is he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, which is it is the people, it is the people, it is the people. I'll share that with you. Kutia te ito o te hara ke ia te komago e ko kima ki ahau e aha te mea nui te mea nui o te leia maku e ki atu kia koe he tangata ki mai ki au he aha te mea nui o te ao. Maku e ki atu ki a koe. He tangata, he tangata. He aha te mea nui, te mea nui o te ao. Maku e ki atu kia koe. He tangata, he tangata. He tangata, he tangata. Thank you for letting us share that with you. And to introduce our topic this morning, so we were invited to share our research, which was published in 2017 on experiences of discrimination and well-being for Polynesians in the US. And just to provide a little bit of an overview, and as much as possible, we would like for this to be more of a conversation. And so we prepared to share with you some of our research findings, but we'd also would like to share, and we've prepared some discussion questions to kind of facilitate some of our conversation and discussion this morning. And we believe that there's so much that we have to learn from one another. And so we're grateful to have this space. And in saying that, with conversations, I know talking about diversity, multicultural issues, and certainly discrimination can be emotionally heavy topics. And so we want to have some kind of frameworks to guide our conversation and discussion this morning. We want to recognize that it's really important to take care of ourselves. And so to give ourselves permission to step back when we need to. And at the same time, want to encourage leaning into that discomfort as much as you feel you're able. Also want to give ourselves permission to let what we say be a first draft. If we don't want to expect ourselves to say everything perfectly the first time, if that's sort of where we fall to, then usually we don't say anything at all. And so we want to encourage engagement here. And also to use I language. I know that was talked about yesterday during Cameron and Cynthia's presentation, but we can really only speak from our own experience. And this is just some of the areas of our research that we'll be sharing with you. And so with that, I will turn the time to Chaylene and Eden to provide some background to our research study.
So like Hoku said, this study, it covers discrimination and health and well-being in Polynesian Americans, which sounds like a really broad topic. And I think that is kind of a testament to how new this research is in the literature. And so in general, compared to other minority groups who may be more established in the United States or who have been just around a little bit longer than Polynesian Americans have, the psychological experience is understudied. And also the population is growing rapidly. The fact that we're even here at this conference is a testament to how recent and how quickly the Polynesian American group is growing in the United States. The US Census data says that it's about 40% since 2010. So roughly the population has doubled and is continuing to increase. And so this research is especially important because there isn't a lot there. And we need more because there are more of us.
Yeah, and just like thinking about how it's so understudied, we can think about how important it is because there is research that is showing how, racial discrimination and has such a huge effect on our mental health on many different ethnicities and minorities in the country. And so knowing that, other groups are experiencing this, African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, and they're being studied, it's important to know that as a Polynesian community, we have our own experiences as well. And we need the research to kind of help us know how to deal with it and what we can do to be better in our life.
So in the study, when we refer to discrimination, so that includes microaggressions, it also includes assumptions about our abilities or our beliefs or opinions that are unfounded that people may make, and also how we're treated in the workplace, how we are treated in the hiring processes, what kind of positions we are given, and how we interact with others.
Yeah. And so a lot of these things that happen of like racial discrimination, like how Eden was saying, microaggressions and, how people are being treated, we can see how it's happening now, especially because of COVID-19. We're seeing a lot of minorities, including the Asian American community, getting hit a lot. And it's happening, verbally, it's happening social media. We see so many videos of it. And this is just kind of a testament that like, it's happening so much. And this is just an example of how it's a timely issue and how we need to address it like now. So the study that we're going to kind of talk about, we're going to talk about how Polynesians are affected by racial discrimination, how it impacts and affects our mental health and our psychological stresses, just like anxiety, stress, and all of those things. So, yeah.
So in our study, just to provide a brief review. Are we still on? Can you guys see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So the sample in the study included 628 Polynesians that were residing in the US. 60% of our sample were women and 40% were men. And within that sample, about 35% were Tongan, 22% were Samoan. We had 10% who identified as Native Hawaiian, 6% were Fijian, 4% were Tahitian, and 2% were Maori. And then another 21% identified as multiracial Polynesians. And then within our sample as well, 98% of Polynesians reported a Christian religious background. Additionally, the age range between our sample was 18 to 76 years with a mean age of 28.7 years. And then regarding education level, about 14% had earned a high school diploma, 40% reported attending some college, 25% indicating receiving a four-year degree, and just about 8% and above reported going to graduate school. And so to analyze Polynesians' experiences with racial discrimination, we used a number of different scales. So the first one was the daily life experience scales. This is an 18-item subscale pulled from the racism and life experiences scale and examines individuals' experiences with racial discrimination related to microaggressions. So an example of that would be like, today I was ignored, overlooked, or not given any service. We also had the trait anger scale. This is a 15-item self-report scale assessing anger as a personality trait in terms of the frequency of anger experienced over time. And an example of a question from that scale is, I have a fiery temper, or I tend to fly off the handle. To measure mental health, we use the DAS-21, which is the depression, anxiety, and anger scale. And this is a 21-item measure, and it has 3 separate subscales for depression, anxiety, and stress. And with each subscale contains about 7 items. Examples of the items were, I felt downhearted and blue. I felt I was close to panic. I found it hard to wind down. And the DAS measures people's level of distress in these categories over the 1-week period. We also use the Rosenberg self-esteem scale, which is a 10-item scale that assesses individual self-esteem and is a frequently used scales among racially diverse populations. An example of an item from this scale includes, on the whole, I am satisfied with myself, or at times I think I'm no good at all. And then finally, we use the satisfaction with life scale. And this is a five item scale that examines individual satisfaction with their life. So for example, the item is, I am satisfied with my life. For the analysis, we use SPSS. And then in this study, descriptive statistics, including means and standard deviations, were analyzed as a method to generally understand where Polynesians fit for each variable on each scale. And then we also did correlational analyses to better understand what variable relationships are present across variables. And then we also examined the indirect effect of variables. And so if you look at the bottom of this slide, you'll see a model there. And so, for example, in this model, we were looking to see if racial discrimination predicted one's satisfaction with life, and if it did so through people's self-esteem. And we ran these models with different outcomes, including depression, anxiety, stress, and again here with the satisfaction of life variable. And then we also ran some t-tests to determine whether study variables varied as a function of participants' gender. And basically what t-tests do is they can be used to test mean scores to see if the findings are by chance or if the data is actually showing that something is there.
And before we present the specific results of this study, I wanted to provide a little bit of context to our study. And in 2010, my dissertation research looked at the relationship between experiences of discrimination and mental health. And it was a meta-analysis study, which means that we're looking at all of the studies that have been done on this topic, and we're trying to provide a summary of that research. And so in that meta-analysis, we were able to include 130 studies totaling over 155,000 individuals. And there was a total effect size of minus 0.19. And what that means is that, so a correlation or R can range between -1 to +1. And minus 0.19 means that for every 100 units of discrimination someone might experience, we would predict that there would be 19 units of distress, right? Or since it's a negative correlation, we would expect that well-being goes down 19 units. And it's a small to moderate effect size, but was statistically significant. And in this meta-analysis, we were able to look at a lot of different variables because there's so many studies and so many people. And so we're able to compare these across participant characteristics, which included how does this vary by race or age or gender, education, acculturation level, economic status, and how might this vary across study characteristics, such as where the data was collected, what was the study design, and when was the study completed. And with participant characteristics, what we found is that the relationship was consistent across all of these variables. So regardless of what race you are, or what age you are, or what gender, the relationship between experiences of discrimination and well-being were consistent across all of these in the negative direction. So as we experience discrimination, it predicts lower levels of mental health, regardless of all of these factors. One thing that I think was really important from the meta-analysis, and this kind of speaks to the importance of the present study, is that all of the studies, or the majority of the studies we looked at, there was only a sufficient sample to look at African American, Latinx, and Asian American. There wasn't sufficient enough sample to include Native American or Pacific Islander or Middle Eastern, so there were lots of data that's still kind of missing. And that's where our present study kind of adds to that. Um, the other things I think can be really important is that one of the criticisms of this kind of research is that it's largely cross-sectional, meaning that we can only look at the relationship between discrimination and well-being at one point in time. And so it's difficult to infer uh, if experiences of discrimination lead to lower levels of mental health, or if lower levels of mental health leads to people interpreting events as being racist. Right? And and one of the great things about this research is that we could compare cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. And what we found is that the results were consistent. They weren't statistically, they weren't different, which lets us know that that relationship is going in one direction, which is that when we experience discrimination, it predicts lower levels of mental health. The only variable that we found was significant was the year in which the study was collected. And so we found that studies that were conducted in more recent years had larger effect sizes. But there are a few things I think that are important to consider there. One is that there are a lot more studies that were published in the last 2 decades than in the previous 5 decades. But also the development of other measures might be much more sensitized to looking at these kinds of experiences. And so I think it's important to kind of keep that in context. So for our present study, and Cameron mentioned these different measures. So daily life experiences of discrimination, the mean score was 2.78. And a score of 2 means that you've experienced discrimination a few times, and a score of 3 is that you experienced it once a month. And so it was kind of in between that, but closer to once a month on average. We also had self-esteem, anger, satisfaction with life, depression, anxiety, and stress. At the bottom, this is an intercorrelation matrix. And so what we were especially looking at are daily life experiences with discrimination and how that relates to satisfaction with life, anger, self-esteem, depression, anxiety, and stress. And you can see here that with the 2 asterisks that all of these were significant at the 0.01 level. And you can see the direction of these relationships too. So more experience of discrimination was associated with lower satisfaction with life and lower self-esteem, and also associated with more anger, more depression, more anxiety, and more stress. And then you can also see with the other intercorrelations how these correlate with one another, right? And so you can kind of see how stress correlates with anger, like more stress is highly correlated with anger. But before I move on, any questions about any of this? Okay, and we'll have time at the end too for other questions. And so just want to consider the implications and takeaways of this research. And what we see is that Polynesian Americans who experience racial discrimination are more likely to report depression, anxiety, and stress, and anger, as well as decreased self-esteem and life satisfaction. And we can also see that these experiences are not uncommon. So 2.78 was close to, on average, about once a month, a person might experience racial discrimination. I also want to keep in mind that this data was collected in 2015, 2016. So this is kind of pre-pandemic data, pre-Trump administration data. And so it's possible that, if we were to do this again, this might look very different. And let's see. As far as future directions and things that can be important to continue to look at, this data is cross-sectional, so it's difficult to infer the direction of the relationship. But based on what I'd mentioned and shared with that with my dissertation study, I think we can have good reason to believe that it is unidirectional. It can also be really helpful to look at subsets of our PI community members who have multiple minority statuses. Because even within our own communities, we can experience these things in a lot of different ways. Yeah. And then last, we just want to open up time for questions, if anyone has any questions. And we have some prompts too that might guide some conversation around this. And if it's okay, I'll stop share for now so we can see folks.
So does anyone have any questions for Dr. Conklin or any of our students? Please feel free to unmute, or you can just use the chat box. And if you don't see anything, Hoku, go ahead and present some of the guiding questions you might have.
Okay.
Hoku, so I think from what I remember, they had y'all had shared out in the beginning that this was research from 2016. So I wanted to see maybe how the research has evolved and how, given a pandemic, how has that affected the mental health of Pacific Islander communities? Because much like Latinos, we are very familial based. And so I wanted to ask a little bit about that.
Yeah, great question. And as far as I know, to my knowledge, this is still the only study I'm aware of that looks specifically at the experiences of Polynesians in the US. And so I'd be interested as well to kind of see what that data would show us. But I think what a lot of research has shown, or different data that's collected from like federal organizations and so forth, is that in the last 4 years, there have been increases in race-related hate crimes that have been reported. One slide that Chaylene and Eden, there was a table included that shows that during 2019, 2020, the hate crimes directed toward Asian Americans went up 150%. And so we have strong reason to believe that there's a lot more of these types of experiences that are occurring in our communities, and it'll be important to understand what impact are these having. And I suppose we can open that up to others too, if others are familiar with kind of what research is available, or if there are other studies that folks are familiar with that might speak to that too. Thank you for that question, Andrea.
I just want to maybe piggyback on Andrea's question, because with all of the social unrest and the constant reminders of racial discrimination, community policing, and just so many things that are happening to different communities of color that are getting national attention. I'm wondering if that is impacting our students and our community, because although some of those things are not directed towards us, I'm wondering if you are seeing anything in your work that sort of elevates the way that Pacific Islanders are dealing with some of those things. I don't know, did my question make sense? Okay, thanks.
And to make sure, I heard you speak to our student community in particular, and how we're seeing that in those populations. And I can speak to that a little bit. I guess I'm really interested, since 3 of our presenters are students, what their perspectives and experiences are.
Yeah, put it back on students. I like that.
Grateful that that they're even willing to share this time in their mana also.
I can say something. Something that I've noticed, especially during the riots and the unrest that was going on last summer, is that there has been a lot more, I think as, at least in my experience being on a college campus, you kind of are drawn to other minorities, you're drawn to people that have the same experiences as you, but that is been significantly stronger. There's been a lot of specifically like Polynesian students for Black students, Asian American students for Black students for, and everybody's coming together to support each other. And I think in areas where we would have seen probably more maybe cultural differences between us in the past, we're all looking for similarities even more with each other. We're looking to connect, like, oh, family is really important to me. Oh, like family is really important to you. Or like, we're looking for shared values, and we're able to see that more. And even just thinking about how people post on social media, I was able to see even my cousins in New Zealand that are Samoan participating in Black Lives Matter efforts to support each other. And it's helped at least me to expand my definition of what it means to be a minority, that it's not just about my culture, it's about all of our cultures.
I would add to that. I would say I've noticed this same thing in the past year. It's been really nice to see different racial groups come together to support one another. And I've noticed that on campus as well. The other thing I've noticed is just that in the uptake of, I think discriminatory experiences and what we see in the news, I think a lot of students have been under higher levels of stress. And what I've noticed is because of the pandemic and quarantine, there's less places for us to process that emotion. And I see that with some of my clients that I work with here at BYU, as well as just in classrooms with students that we're teaching. And so I think that in other ways, college campuses and through the use of technology like Zoom, a lot of people have created unique ways to talk about these things that we didn't necessarily exist before, like such as this conference even, where we're able to come together and kind of process some of the experiences, where in the past we could do it in person and it was much easier to do so. So I think the combination of the two, I've noticed higher levels of stress, but also unique ways of coping.
And then just kind of adding on like what all of them or both of them have said, you can see how much it affects literally everybody. Like especially here at BYU, there's, at least in the Family, Home, and Social Science department, their administration, they're like trying to find ways to have people talk about their experiences. So there's a lot of panels going on. They made the diversity and inclusion committees for the departments. And so they're really trying, and it's student led. So a lot of it is they're trying to get what the students are feeling and finding a way that they can make the campus better. It is a little slow because it's a new thing, but it's good to know that people are reacting to what's happening to, in the riots, in how Asian Americans are being, are experiencing hate towards them. And it gives hope, but it also, as a student, it makes me want to work more with it. And so it gives more opportunities for students to be able to participate, like how in the poli-sci research group, they're allowing the students to share what we're experiencing in this conference. So.
As they were sharing, and I was reflecting, so I've been able to be a part of it at BYU. Myself and a few of my colleagues have been leading a multicultural forum on campus. And so it's been a space we've hoped that it could be a space for our BIPOC students in particular to gather, to talk about experiences related to race, ethnicity, while also being in a white majority university. And I guess some things I've been seeing, and just speaking from my own experience just this last week, hearing in the news and in the media about Mr. Wright, who was shot and killed, Mr. Nazario, who was, I guess, video footage was released recently about him being pulled over and assaulted, and as I watch some of these videos, read about these, learn about this, and we're in the midst right now of George Floyd's trial of the police officer who knelt on his neck, and it's a lot, and just watching the video of Mr. Nazario when he got pulled over. I'm not sure if others were able to watch this too, but I could feel it in my body. Like my heart would start to beat faster. I emotionally, I'd feel angry, I feel afraid, I feel all those kinds of things, which just happen instantaneously. And within our communities, especially when it affects people that we feel some proximity to, people who look like us, people who we experience that, and with racial trauma, Cameron presented on that yesterday. And we don't have to experience that personally to feel that. We can just observe it. If it happens to people that we're close to, that we identify with, we're experiencing it in our own way. And that's kind of stressors that are on top of, for our students being in a stressful academic environment, and just on top of a lot of other stressors that people are having to face.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because I feel another layer of stress when I see those things on TV or I see it in social media. And in the work that I do, those discussions come several times a day as direct service providers, and having to help our clients and our communities navigate through some of those challenges. And I want to just, I'm gonna say something, and because I feel like this is a safe space, but there's also a very distinct weird thing happening in the underbelly of our community, and that's that some Pacific Islanders don't feel like it's our problem. Like, oh, that's, yeah, well, we're not Black, so it doesn't apply to us, or oh, remove the PI from the Asian because that doesn't impact us as well. Oh, they're talking about building a wall, good luck, things like that. Like, there's this narrative that our own Pacific Islander community tends to elevate every time we see something like that. And so I struggle with that as someone who has a large capacity for empathy and recognizing that all of our communities suffer. I mean, as a community that has different islands among the Pacific that has been colonized, for me, when I even think that we could even say something like that is really disturbing to me. And so for those of us in the work, those of you who are experts and professionals in the work, when we hear that, what are we saying to our community members when that's the narrative? And what are we saying to help our community? Because I'm not going to force anybody to agree with me. I'm not going to force anybody to feel the way that I feel, but it stresses me out. It stresses me out that we out here in the streets trying to do this work, and then it's my own people that are like saying, well, it's like, I don't even know why, just focus on the Pacific Islander community. And so I just really struggle with that. I want to open that up and wonder if anyone else is experiencing that. I'm curious what Dr. Allen thinks about this, maybe Dr. Tovo, who's also on the call. How can we as a community really elevate the needs of other communities? Because I feel like when we stretch out and expand our focus, that we can in return strengthen our own community. So I know I'm talking a lot and I shouldn't be because I'm the MC, but since nobody was saying anything, I figured I'd bring it up and tickle somebody's throat to say something.
Melissa, I know that here at Weber State, where I work at, that's a constant kind of struggle, is having our students, not just PI students, but all of our underrepresented students, like find commonality or find the intersects of where they're at. And so at least under my department, we try to create events and programs that are leadership founded or foundational, where they all have to come together. And so we talk about oppression, we talk about racism, we talk about all of these things where we know that us as underrepresented community members intersect at. And so as advisors, we also want to make sure that we're creating intentional programs where we collaborate with each other. So then that way we can start learning who we are at the individual level, because I think that's where it begins, is that individual relationship. But I've noticed here in Utah that is much more harder than even from California where I was at. So there's definitely a lot of work to be done. But I can only speak to what we've been doing, at least here institutionally.
So if I could just share a few of my thoughts I've had just now. I've been reflecting on what Melissa just said, and she called out for my thoughts. So I'm gonna try to do my very best. I'm really learning quite a bit. I appreciate Hoku and the students here at BYU doing such great work here with the poli-sci team, Polynesian Psychology Research Team. But some of the things that came to my mind when we think about the AAPI, right? We're the PI of the AA. Whether or not you agree with us being combined with AA or not, this is a societal issue that involves all of us, right? And so we are charged with opportunities to have a voice, to increase our visibility in terms of creating justice and equity across all peoples, right? All BIPOC individuals, families, all indigenous peoples. And so my question is, why, so Melissa talked a little bit about this, why are we not able to include ourselves? Why are we saying, you know, this is a Black issue, or this is other people's issues, this is not, we shouldn't be involved? And I wonder if there are cultural values, ancient cultural values, or even contemporary cultural values that prevent us from voicing, from putting ourselves out there and being visible. I wonder if there are Pacific Islander cultural values where we resort to deference or respect or humility in a way that we don't have. Right, exactly. I'm seeing the chat. In terms of a humility where we don't feel comfortable voicing our opinions outwardly or even loudly. And I wonder if there are cultural pieces to this where we aren't as active or activists as we should because of how we were raised. And so I guess my question is to everyone else, are there cultural pieces to this that kind of prevent us from voicing and being out there and being visible around these very important issues?
As we are on that topic, I'm also thinking of particularly in Aotearoa, more recently on the Big Island at Mauna Kea TMT, and that it's and I guess I'm thinking about it at TMT in particular, the kind of the operating philosophy there is kapu aloha, right? And I hear how they've described this way of blending, kind of standing firm with those things that are important, and doing so in a way that maintains openness and aloha. When the governor visited them, I remember seeing pictures of them doing hongi or honi with him, and I was thinking, what a powerful picture that is of people standing for something that's so important that they believe in, and can still share your ha with someone else that is opposed to what you're doing. And so I'm thinking about that, right, of finding that balance, because and I really like a comment, a quote that Martha Mendez posted, of a quote from Martin Luther King, but injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so if we kind of presume that these don't matter to us, these don't affect our communities, they will, and they do. Um, and so, yeah, it's important to make our voice heard. And I was really struck by Kumuhina and some of what she had to say yesterday, particularly in response to a question I posed. But the message was kind of own your space, stand. That's just my thoughts.
I think you were gonna say something.
Good morning, everyone. My bad, y'all. My hair is all messy. I have a kid. He's about 7 weeks old, so I'm still trying to figure out this mother thing. I'm really sorry I was late to this, but I just wanted to add into the talanoa that we're having right now. Kopingoa, Kofina Osina Tovo. I'm from East Palo Alto, California. And I am a professor and coordinator at the College of San Mateo at the Mana Learning Community, which helps with retention for Pacific Islander students. I've been there for about 10 years. And I just wanted to thank Ray, my sis, for inviting me to this important conversation. And I remember our first violence prevention conference at CSM in San Mateo, and it's so awesome to see all these beautiful faces, which is why I turned on my video, because I feel like if you guys can turn on your video, I can too, just don't judge me. And I think I wanted to hop on this conversation about us feeling like our people will, I kind of wrote it on the comments, it'd be our own people that be kind of coming against us, right? And I think that a lot of times we feel like we have to worry about our people, or we tend to think that it's something in our culture that puts them on the hook or off the hook. But Dr. Martin Luther King also said that racism and hate is not, you're not born with it, you are born with your culture, but you are taught these things throughout when you're like, as you're being raised in whatever context you're in. So I wanted to talk about us as a diaspora, and how at the end of the day, like, we can be as Tongan as we want to be, but we are in the context of like the Bay Area or in California. And I've been dealing with this issue for like the last probably about a few days because of Dante White's murder, and how it makes me feel like I have rage in my heart because of the way that I'm sure all of us in here feel the same way. But it makes me even more pissed that my people aren't backing me up, or I feel like I'm alone in all this. But I wanted to share with you guys that that's the reality of it, is that sometimes we have to be the example all the time. And if we don't take care of ourselves mentally and spiritually and physically, we're not going to be able to continue, because we're going to be so filled with hate for our own people because of the expectations we have. But I think I heard someone said earlier that if we continue to move as an example, as someone who will continue to show solidarity, even when no one else is showing it, even when your own people and your own families coming against you on it, it makes you a stronger person. And in return, our ancestors, I believe that my God will continue to send help, and will continue to send folks that will stand in solidarity with you. So some of the things that I've done is that I've added myself into group. I've literally done more just because I see that people don't do anything. I've done more by adding my spaces into more healing spaces. I've added myself into more friends that surround myself with it, because we got to take care of ourselves, y'all. It is ugly. Like and it's not just in our PI community. I think I heard earlier with our Latinx community and our Asian community. Yeah, he agrees too. That sometimes like we don't have an answer, and it's been like this for a long time. And I can also hold myself accountable, y'all. I was in the same situation that my family was in about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Like, let's be real. We weren't all in this solidarity work, but it took something somewhere, or it took someone who wouldn't quit on their own heart and in their own activism that inspired me to be this way. I would like to also respond that about our culture. And if there's something in there that we learn about where we kind of have these separations and stuff. And I just want to say that for me, I don't blame my culture for any of this, because I do believe that it's easier for us to blame it on our culture so that we can be taken off the hook, right? So that the accountability is not on me. The accountability is like, oh, it's the Tongan way. That's why they're not doing it. And I think that once we continue to do that for our family or our traditionalists, then we're not actually jabbing it at them, right? Like, to me, I think I can only speak from the Tongan culture or the Tongan context. And then even in the Tongan context, I can only speak it from in an American Tongan context. And in Tonga, just to not talk so much, is that in Tonga, they don't see race, or they don't view the definition of race the way we do here in America. We live in a racialized society to where we don't even realize that this is not even a real thing. Race is a socially constructed conversation that continues to isolate and separate us, which it uses from the federal government with our ethnicities, with census, right? Where AAPI becomes an issue. But if we keep unpacking these layers, we tend to realize, like, dang, it's actually not that. It's actually colonization or coloniality. And so I was in Tonga for a while last year during the pandemic. I was there for about 10 months. And that was the issue for me, is that why isn't Tonga supporting this conversation of what's going on, let's say, with the Black lives? And I was really humbled by understanding the Western concept of racism and where it starts from, and then understanding why Tongans in Tonga don't understand racism. And then, of course, here, I talk too much, where it goes down to where then it goes to church, where Tonga's culture is rooted in Christianity. And then we remember Christianity of religions, of what it did to the indigenous people. And we're like, oh, shoot, we're going around this conundrum where all the students are taking here in America is that the Tongan culture is this way and this way and this way, without really understanding it. And I'm not trying to take those who don't stand with us in solidarity off the hook, but I have used that as a way for me to harness and to move forward with, so that I'm not using a lot of hate to build on hate, but use a lot of compassion in order for me to move forward with me standing in solidarity for our Asian families, for our Asian elders. I think of my grandma, I think of my mom on those conversations. But at the same time, I have to make sure that I take care of myself, and that I find these spaces where it may not be a lot of spaces, but it's way more spaces now than it was when I was in high school, right? And so I think we live in a generation where we're like, no, it needs to happen like this. If it doesn't happen like this, it's not gonna win, and blah, blah, blah. And with this whole conversation of police brutality and my anger towards the institution of policing in America, I have used incremental wins for me to be able to temporarily heal what's going on or keep me calm. to where every time I want to spaz out on these conversations or get pissed that people are not coming on, I tend to look for the goodness in it. And I feel like that's what Kapu Aloha is that we continue to have faith in our land, our spirit, our ancestors, that they continue to send help. And I'm not kidding, just me being in this conference right now is actually my ancestors sending me help with the conversation of Dante Wright and the issues of senseless violence that we continue to hide behind these police brutalities. But I just wanted to share on how I deal, because I see a lot of upcoming scholars in this midst of ours that I'm okay that I can't change the world today, but I feel like every day I don't quit, I'm changing my space. And as we continue to change spaces, we'll realize that it becomes much, much more bigger when we see more faces of art. I just wanted to say thank you for giving me the space of sharing. And I look forward to continuing to share this space with y'all. Malo.
Thank you, baby mama. Love it. Thank you, Dr. Tovo. As we conclude, I just want to again thank the students. I want to thank Dr. Conklin for representing and presenting around racial discrimination and the psychological health among Polynesian Americans. I want to thank you all who have contributed to the conversation. I want to thank Dr. Allen for not turning off his camera and turning on his mic, because I kind of voluntold him to say something, as well as Dr. Tovo. So thanks y'all for allowing me to kind of be me as I'm helping us navigate through our journey of this conference.